Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Gush Erupt Deconstruct. I am here with my friend Tony Sosa,
What's good, y'all?
and we are talking today about magic. Yes, is it real? Is it fake? Is it pseudoscience? And we'll be talking about a little bit about that too. Oh, okay. I already see you. I already see you. You know, you're
Yeah,
getting.
man. I listen. I'm already. I already have my thoughts.
Of course. You've been on quite the journey. I mean, when I first met you, I felt like you were kind of dipping your toe into the pseudoscience pool, and I feel like at this point, I mean, your whole leg is in it. Is it the leg or is your whole head
It's
in
the whole
there?
body, baby. It's the whole. I'm fully submerged. Like
Okay.
it's. Yeah. No, I was fully submerged. Yeah, I think when you met me, I think we was working at a Cheesecake Factory, and
Yes.
it was at Cheesecake Factory, and God, I was like 22, and I think I had just no, I was at the time when I was with my ex girlfriend, which obviously we don't do anymore, and after that whole break, I think you were even with me after the breakup, and at that point, I think I said it before one time. I think when I was talking with a friend, and I was like, at that point, I just kind of decided, you know, if I'm gonna practice witchcraft, I mean, might as well fuck men too. Like, let's just go all in. Like,
Okay.
why even fully, why even restrain myself in any type of capacity? And yeah, and then I think I was later on. I think I later on in that time, yes, because it was after I broke up with her. I was initiated because I was initiated in 2017 and March of 2017, I believe it was. Yeah, it was for spring equinox, and ever since then, I'm now a third degree high priest in my tradition. I have a coven of about 13 people. We meet for the Sabbats and for Esbits. And for those of you who don't know, Esbits are minor Sabbats; those are full moons and things like that. So, I mean, I'm completely enmeshed in all of that. And then I wound up having, not to get too far off topic, but, I wound up having, I don't know, almost an ancestral kind of surge come in at some point. And then, I started to have really strange dreams with like Orisha and, these kinds of visions, if you wanted, because I'm a very avid dreamer, a very vivid dreamer, and I was having these really intense dreams with Orisha. And then, I talked to my mom and I found out my whole side of my family over in Cuba, because I'm Cuban too and Dominican. And, well, I have Mexican too, as my grandma. But anyway, my family in Cuba all does Santeria. And I just kind of clicked. And then once I did that, I just started having just really profound experiences. And that really helped me embrace myself and really connect to my ancestral roots, as Afro Latino, and connecting to everything that our people did over there on that side of the island and their spirituality. And that just really transformed me really deeply, if I'm being totally honest. But traditional witchcraft, I mean, really molded and shaped me still to this day in so many ways. And as a matter of fact, when I went and I sat down with who's now my padrino for my first reading with him when I went to go join his ile, ile is a house, and they brought down a legua on the mat using the caracoles because we're an oriate house. And my padrino told me, El legua said, the spirits that you're coming to me with, you need to continue to honor them. And you need to continue to pay tribute to them, because had it not been for them, you would never have arrived at a legua's door. And oh, look, I'm giving myself chills. And ever so, I was like, you know what? And so I just kind of embraced both sides, which traditional witchcraft is obviously very European magic, and Santeria is African. So it's like a blend of both, which I feel like makes up even just genetically what I'm made up of anyway. So it's like it kind of just checks all the boxes for me.
Right, because I mean, were you born in Dominican Republic? I was.
Oh, you were? No, I was born here in the U.S.
No, I was born in Dominican Republic, and then we moved to the U.S. when I was like 3 months old. So it's interesting how, that culture still plays a lot into your personality. Like, I'm very Americanized, but at the same time, like, I'm not
I
that
mean,
chill a lot of the time, and that's Dominican. That's
well, I
Dominican.
mean, well, okay. So on the point of that, I mean, so when if you're out on the street and someone asks you, like, where are you from? Do you say American or do you say I'm Dominican?
I say I'm Dominican.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, my
See, it's funny.
accent my accent speaks for me. Like,
No,
they're
yeah, I
like
mean,
he's
even
American.
well, yeah, well, I mean, it depends because now I live out here in Atlanta, and a lot of times people are like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm from, well, I'm Dominican first," and they're like, "Oh, okay," and they're like, "You were from here, whatever," and I was like, "No, I'm from Miami," and they're like, "Well, you have like a kind of Spanish twang to your voice or your accent, and I was like, really? And they're like, yeah. So I guess you and I have kind of Spanish accents, and we probably just don't even know it. We've
No, the
spent
only
so much
accent I
time
have
in
is the
Miami.
accent.
Is the what?
The gay accent. That's pretty much the only accent I have. I don't hear any Spanish accent at all. But
I
hey,
don't
I
think
mean,
you.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't hear it either. But that's also when I go back home. No one sounds like they have a Spanish unless they're like Spanish was their first language, and it's really obvious to tell.
Yeah.
But like the ones who are born here and stuff like that, they all sound like you and me. But when I moved out here to Atlanta, apparently we have a Spanish accent.
All right,
Uh,
all right.
yeah,
So
that was interesting.
for people who don't know what Santeria is, why don't we just give them kind of like a preview into some of the practices, like in language and terms that they can understand? Because I don't really know what it is either. I think,
Sure.
and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is you honor certain figures, certain saints, right? And they're all in charge of like different things in nature or in life. Am I on the right track or no?
Yeah, I mean, well, yes and no. The history of Santeria is so nuanced and complicated, but essentially what it is Santeria is an Afro-Cuban religion, and it was brought over from the Yoruba people from West Africa during the slave trade. And so, and this is an interesting topic because I talk about this often with Black Americans. To try to, we also dealt with slavery. We also dealt with our own thing going on. Our colonizers were white men that spoke Spanish. You know what I'm saying? Theirs spoke English, but there were also differences between them, and that led to the development of Santeria, and then what happened here in America magically, which is really interesting. And so, because the Spanish were more concerned if you were Catholic more than anything, the Yoruba people had to disguise their Orisha, which are their African gods, or which were originally elevated ancestors into godhood. They had to disguise their Orisha behind the figures of saints. So when you would see them, throwing these big festivals to La Caridad de Cobre, that's not La Caridad del Cobre, that is Oshun. But it had to look like Catholicism so that the Spanish could be like, okay, this is just the Africans practicing their take on our religion. And they kind of left it at that. Whereas over in America, the English Protestants did not allow any type of preservation of any kind of African culture. They fought to stamp out the language, and things like that. Where again, over in the Caribbean, where we're from, the Spanish were again concerned if you were Catholic and if you were getting your work done. So because of that, the Africans over there were able to preserve their music, a lot of their customs, a lot of the language, a lot of that, and a lot of that led to the thriving of West African religion in the Caribbean. Whereas in America, which this is where I think is interesting, and I really truly feel you cannot take magic out of the African mind. It's just kind of that spiritual current is just there. In America, they had the Bible, and that's all they had. So what came out of that? Hoodoo. Hoodoo comes out of that. So the Africans started to use the Bible, and they saw it as a spell book. They saw it as a book of magic, and they started to work their magic and their folk magic, and they took what they remembered from their ancestral customs and mixed it with that Christianity, so that it kind of looked like Christianity, even though they were doing magic. You know what I'm saying? They weren't praying the Psalms as like a prayer. They were deliberately using the Psalms as like a spell combined with other things like herbs and oils and other things that they would incorporate into that to achieve those ends.
It was like
Um,
Houdini. It really is magic. It's like
I mean,
it's
yeah,
like a
I mean that's
trick.
what it was. Yeah, that's what it was, and that's funny you say trick because what they would call it when you would do a work or put a work on somebody, they would say you're laying tricks. You'll hear that a lot in New Orleans. Oh, they laid a trick on you, and they mean they did magic.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm glad and relieved that it is not, killing chickens in a closet, Azealia Banks.
Well, okay, so here's the thing though. I mean, since we're talking about Santeria, yeah, there is animal sacrifice, and I'm gonna talk about that. I remember when I first came to my padrino, and I was telling him, I have this hang up over, the animal sacrifice part. And my padrino turned to me and he goes, ¿Y tú comes carne? Do you eat meat?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, of course. And he was just like, and where do you think it is that your meat comes from? You don't think they kill that animal? And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, of course. And he was just like, then you should pay that animal the respect to see where your meat comes from. And so I sat on that for a while. And then I came back to him and I was just like, I think I'm ready. And he said, you need to understand that all life eats life. Everything in this world eats each other in some form or another. Even when we die and we go into the ground eats us. We are eaten, and life eats life. So he says, we eat the body, Orisha eat life force, which is the blood. Now, the animals which I have seen are killed very quickly and as humanely as possible, far more humane than what is happening in slaughterhouses where we actually get our meat from. The other thing too is that I was actually pretty taken aback seeing my first sacrifice, and that's when I was receiving my guerreros, my warriors, Elegua, Ochosi, and Ogun, and Osuntu, and then I received my Himaguas, my twins, the children of Ochun, and that was the first time I saw my sacrifice, and they cleansed me. They did el depojo, the cleansing with the chicken on me, and they killed the chicken. And I remember during the time I'm holding the chicken and I'm looking at it, weirdly enough, it fills you with a very deep sense of reverence because you're understanding this life is dying so that I could move forward. Because the way it's seen is it's going to happen to you or we're going to take that and put it on this animal. Which one do you want? And that for that reason, it's something that it's not taken lightly. Like we're just not just out here just killing shit just because we want to do that. When blood is called for, it's a very serious moment. It's either for usually for cleansings or to heal sicknesses, because what they'll do is, for example, they'll take cancer off of you and they'll put it onto an animal and then they kill the animal. Because when you heal something, when you remove an illness, that illness has to go somewhere. That's why I tell people, who think that they do quote unquote white magic, even though we know there's no such thing as either or. But say, oh, I only do healing, and I'm like, so when you remove illness off of somebody, do you transfer it to something else, a puppet, an animal, something? No. So where do you think that illness is going then, my love? That illness
Not
could be
my
going.
love.
Yeah, it's true. That illness could be going to a serial killer or a single mother of four. You wouldn't know that. So that's why I say all magic, it don't matter. Comes there's a give and a take to it. You know what I'm saying? Even the most innocent thing that people would think, oh no, I only do light magic and like I only use the spell to give me a job. Okay, you
Not
use the
get you
spell
a
to.
job. Wait. I have an anecdote, and I
Sure.
need you to just confirm or verify if this chick was doing her spell correctly or not.
Okay.
Now we're not gonna name names,
Okay.
but it was someone who I have like, one degree of separation with, and she cast a spell like for financial success, and like she put it underneath her bed. There was like some coins in there. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
freaking know. But at the time she didn't even have a job, and I was like, cast a spell after you get employed. Or am I crazy?
No, it's not at
Okay.
all. I
Okay.
mean, well, I mean, well, no, what you're saying isn't crazy, but what she's doing isn't crazy either because that's kind of the point.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
it's what magic is most potent when there's a sense of urgency. When you need to, because desire is like a fuel to that. It's kind of it's kind of funny because sometimes I say it's like the unforgivable curses from Harry Potter, and it's like you have to mean it and you have to really want it. If not, nothing's gonna come out of that. I've done spells to get work before, and I've gotten it. I've known plenty of people who have done them. That's why we do what we do. I think part of being a witch is not being powerless at the mercy of life, or kind of being at life's mercy. You know what I'm saying? It's like if I'm ever in a situation where it would make somebody stuck, I can do an abre camino. I can open my roads. I can bring things to me to help me get out of that situation. I'm not just kind of again at life's mercy, and I think that's the real power that comes in being a witch.
Okay. Not too different from other religions that say that like God or whatever the figure is helps those who help themselves. Not too different. Not too far
Well,
removed.
what's actually really funny about that quote is I think Ben Franklin actually said
Benjamin
that.
Franklin, creator of electricity.
Yes, I think it was actually Ben Franklin who actually said that.
I mean, wise
And
man. He made
but no, but
electricity.
it's good shit though, and but that's kind of the thing, right? It's like I've known people who like they've done a spell for like to find love, right? But then they don't
Okay,
really.
that is so thirsty.
Hey, listen, listen, love magic is probably one of the oldest and most popular forms of
Okay,
magic. I
honestly,
can
you're
tell you.
probably right. You're probably right. Let me ask you a question though.
Sure.
So, in general, when you explain to people that you're a witch and like this is your
I'm not
religion,
rich.
no, I meant to say witch. I meant
No,
to
I know,
say
I know. I was like, oh,
witch.
baby, I'm not rich.
Oh yeah, you know what? I'm not either, and even if I was, I would just tell people that it's not true. I would
Yeah,
just be
well,
like, no.
I deny all allegations.
Because you know what? I'm poor and they still barking up this tree. And it's like, can you send me some money because yo quiero traer fulano y fulana? And I'm like, bring them yourself. Anyways,
That part.
so what is the reaction from people when they find out about your spiritual practice?
That really kind of depends. When I lived in Miami, I mean, am I allowed to curse on here?
Sure. And if I need to remove it, I'll
I,
remove it.
I know I only say that because I tend to swear a lot, so like I've been pretty conscientious, I guess, of my word choice.
I
Um,
guess just don't be gratuitous.
okay, I will. I'm gratuitous, so I will. I'll tone it down though. But yeah, no one really gives a fuck in Miami, because again, there's such a prevalent Caribbean culture there that things like Santeria and all of that is so enmeshed into the culture, even to the point where you have people who are not necessarily witches or santeros or any kind of practitioners, but they do little like trabajos, just because my mom told me that if I do this, like, and it's a little spell that they're doing, but they don't really see it that way. It's almost like a cultural thing, which that's kind of the thing with magic, though. It's like after the advent of Christianity and they ruined everything for everybody, that is when magic started to get category or magic and witchcrafts became like this very distinct thing that it's like a very conscious decision where you're like, I am going to do and consult the devil and do magic. But if you really look at people that were living back at that time, they did what we would call little trabajos and things like that. Like, oh, if you want him to love you more, put honey under your tongue. And when you talk to, but they didn't see that as like the way we see it now is like witchcraft. It was just something you did. It was just, hey, it's almost like, oh, is your tooth hurting? Take this aspirin. It was that same kind of thing. It's like, oh, you want his attention? Oh, okay, we'll spray this and then go to this river. Like, that's kind of how they thought about things, and that's very much the same kind of culture in Miami. It's like that's just something you do. Like, they don't really see it as brujeria.
Okay, so
It's
where
just
would you say that you get a converse reaction?
here, here in Atlanta, which is still, I'm in the Bible Belt, so it's that is where I'm a lot more reluctant to reveal that information unless I'm really comfortable with who I'm talking to, and I'm like, oh, this person's cool. Like, and even then, like, I kind of give little breadcrumbs to just kind of like test it out. Sometimes, like, they brought up tarot one time, and I was like, oh, I read tarot. And they're like, oh, really? And I was like, oh, yeah, I do actually,
Yes,
because
and you're good at it. I would like to say he's very good
oh,
at it.
thank you, thank
I
you,
think
thank
we've
you.
done two readings. Two?
It's only given you two throughout the years. Wow.
I think it's two, and I think I wanted a third, but you were like, I learned too much.
That's fair because I don't like to be. That's one thing about me is I have integrity, and I was talking about this the other day. Sometimes I don't want to say I wish I didn't have a conscience, but sometimes I do because it's like, bro, if I didn't have a conscience, the way I could just be scamming people off this shit is crazy.
Ooh.
Because I go on TikTok and I'm not on Witch Talk. Like, I'm not involved in any of that. It is a fucking mess. And a good 8 out of 10 times the things you hear on TikTok are either about witchcraft and magical practices are either incorrect, made up, or a combination of the two. And yeah, I just wouldn't trust any of that information. Uh, I lost my train of thought though. You were, I
Oh, that's
forgot what you
okay.
said before.
So we were talking about like the difference between how you get received in a place like
Oh,
Atlanta versus how
right,
you get
yeah.
received in
So
Miami.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's really where I see the most adverse kind of reaction. Even in more rural parts, like when I go to like North Carolina or even like Cumming, which is like about an hour north of from where I am in Atlanta. And Cumming is a very white with the Hua kind of town, and they're very Christian, and that whole kind of thing. So it's like I try not to talk about any of that kind of stuff. So that's something that I've definitely gotten used to. I remember when I moved out here, a friend of mine who was also from Miami moved out here, and he introduced me to a bunch of people, and he was like, "Yeah, my friend Tony's the high priest of a coven," and I was just like, "Ugh, why did you
You're like,
just say
can you
that?
be quiet? Can you
Can
just tell
you
him my
be
day job?
quiet?" Right, exactly. Like, you know what I'm saying? But in Miami, I would have been like, "Oh yeah, like I don't care," you know what I mean? Because no one really either they would have been like, "Oh shit," or they would have been indifferent in Miami. But here, like, no, that's not the kind of thing people really push or market about themselves.
Okay, yeah, so you get a very strong reaction. I mean, is there a particular case where it was just excessive or a particularly memorable experience?
I think recently I was talking to this guy who is a gay Christian, which that's just a whole another eye roll in itself. And I was talking to him, and he's like, also tell me, I forgot what he said, I can't remember, but I remember at some point I was like, well, I mean, you know, I'm a witch, right? And he goes, hell no, you ain't no motherfucking witch. He's like, what you talking about? He's like, no, you not. I think you just spiritual. I was like, yeah, I am spiritual, but I'm also a witch. That is my spirituality. Like that's what I do. And it wasn't. He didn't make like a. It didn't get aggressive or anything, but just that initial reaction of like hell, not like in just this instant fear. I was like, okay. I was like, I don't think you're actually down with my lifestyle.
Well, I mean, after all, he is a Christian, so I think when things are diametrically opposed, people get intimidated.
Wait, that who's a Christian?
Huh?
Who's a Christian?
That guy who you were referring to,
Oh, oh,
right?
oh, oh! I thought you said you were a Christian.
No, I don't attend any sort of church service. I'm fascinated by a lot of different religions, and I'm not assigned to anything. But like, just like in yours, I see value in all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I do see value in all religions. Yeah, I think a witch is a student of every religion anyway. I can sit there and I can talk with a Muslim and I can talk with a Hindu and I can talk with a Jewish person and be educated about their religion. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
what I find more often than not is Christians are not. So it's like they don't really know anything about it most times about other religions, and what they do know are stereotypes or just not true at all. And that's kind of the thing.
So are you willing to have like an educational conversation with them? Or are you like, oh, this is kind of not exactly what I want to do?
The, you know, oh God. All right, I'm gonna try to be as PC and respectful as I can here, because especially at the time that we're living in, and we're seeing the rise of Christian nationalism and hyper religious fanaticism, and it's kind of reminding me of like being in the fucking 16th century or something, with all of this kind of like weird religious like obsession and trying to control our lives and take away rights and all these other kinds of things. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. A quite I have quite a great deal of hostility towards Christians at this point, um, both towards the fanatics and also to the ones who are allowing the fanatics. Because the ones who are allowing this are quick to say, well, it's not all Christians. They just give us a bad name. Well, then why aren't you saying anything? You're not actively voicing yourselves against these Christians who are giving your religion a bad rep and doing all these terrible things. So you're just as guilty, and you're just as big of a part of that problem. The other reason why, to answer your question in brief, at this stage in the game, no, I don't think that there's any discussion to be had. Mostly because if we cannot even agree on reality, there is no discussion to be had. If you're telling me that you truly believe that talking snakes, pregnant virgins, and that a man lived in a whale for 3 days is historical fact, and that a man walked on water and died and rose from the dead, we are no longer having a discussion of reality. We're talking mythology. And if you believe mythology, then I mean, I don't know what to say. And before I even get onto the next part, because even myself as a witch, we do use pagan idols and things like that and ideas from mythology. But here's the key difference. I know that when I read a myth, it's a fucking story. That's the thing. I don't believe that Zeus actually came down and transformed into a swan to fuck Leto. I don't think that really happened, and neither did the ancient people. They were using mythology as allegories to convey a deeper meaning or a deeper message. That's what mythology was, and that's why I think biblical literalism is the death. It is of their humanity. It's brain rot. They even did a study, as a matter of fact, with children, and they concluded in that study that children who are raised religious have a harder time distinguishing fantasy from reality. So when they were asking children who were raised in Christian households things about dragons and all these, they were more likely to answer that these were real than children who were not. And I think that's really telling, and it's also really disturbing. The other thing that one of the biggest gripes that I have with Christians is it's very difficult to have a conversation with people about helping this planet and helping this world and helping us to get better when their entire theology revolves around the world ending. So they don't really care about what happens to this planet because their
Or is
glory
that a
is in
small
heaven.
sect? Because I know that there's a sect who they do want, the end to come, but there are
No,
others.
it's all of them. I'm gonna tell you. Fun fact about myself: I was the biggest Bible thumper you would have met in your life. Okay,
I know you
I
told me
was.
you used to work as an apologist.
Oh, I mean, I didn't. I wouldn't say I worked as an apologist, but I was heavy into apologetics. I was Bible Club president. I was a small group leader at church. I did missions trip, local missions trips in like Miami and stuff like that. Like I wanted to be, what do you call it, a missionary going over abroad. I read my Bible every day. That's why I can go to this day toe to toe with any Christian about the Bible, and I'll use the Bible to argue with you because that's how familiar I am with it. And at its base, at its core, all Christians are looking forward to the second coming of Christ, which is the end of the world. It's an apocalyptic cult. It's a death cult. I mean, if you walk into a church, I mean, you see a picture of Jesus, their savior, their Messiah, dying in agony on the most one of the most brutal forms of execution. I mean, if Jesus died today, can you imagine how morbid it would be if to see someone walking around with a little electric chair dangling around
Not
their
an
neck?
electric chair. Oh my
I mean, but
god.
that's the equivalent though. But that's the actual equivalent though. That's what they didn't have electrocution. They had crucifixion, which was the most brutal way they could have killed you at the time. Electrocution is probably the closest thing we have to that in a modern time. So if Jesus died now, can you imagine walking into a place of worship where you see a man frozen in agony on an electric chair and everyone's just singing songs like that is morbid.
I
And
don't know. I always feel like whatever empowers someone or like gives them strength, I don't want to take that away from them. And that's pretty. I think I don't see myself deterring from that viewpoint.
here's the thing: I don't actively go out of my way to bother Christians.
Right.
And most people can attest it's actually the other way around. They come into your space with their message and they want you to believe what they believe because that's the only form of validation that they have, in my personal opinion. And at that point, you are forcing me to engage with you. And so I can ask you, and here's my thing. I don't sit here and be like, your religion's a death cult, blah, 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 blah. Again, I know the Bible very well. All I do is ask them a question. And more often than not, that question causes them to spiral. And then they feel attacked and then they feel persecuted. But then here's the thing: Christians, as a culture, persecution is the thing. Because even the Bible says, you are blessed if you're persecuted because that means you're apart from the world and you're chosen by God in this whole thing. But they take any kind of adversity as persecution. And I'm speaking from experience here. They will go out to preach on a street corner and run into somebody that says, I don't believe in this, or this is nonsense. And then they'll go back and they'll say, I was persecuted today for my beliefs. And then the other Christians will validate that. Yes, you were persecuted because they didn't want to hear the truth. And it just creates an echo chamber.
I
And
mean,
then
I
it creates a
definitely have
persecution
seen that in
complex.
certain circumstances. There's a preacher at FGCU who he does the most. I do feel like, it's still like a small percentage, or am I wrong?
A
Or
small
do you just
percentage
disagree?
a small percentage that what
That behave that way, where it's like,
But
you're
there's a small percent. Yeah, there's a small percentage that are out there soapbox preaching for sure. Not like that's a very small fragment of them, but you forget the Great Commission, where Jesus says, "Go forth and make disciples of all nations and
no, of
baptize them in the
course. And
Father,
I mean,
Son."
that's like a
So,
numbers game and all those other
right.
types of
So
things.
all Christians are called to proselytize. You will not meet a Christian who will let you know that they're Christian and try to preach the word to you in some type of capacity because they are called to do that. They're supposed, quote for quote, to be doing that. You
Sure,
know,
but it's also like the other party's freedom to say, okay, no, like not for
sure, it
me.
is. But then what I'm getting at is when that happens, trust and believe, because I was that and I have seen that and I've been to many churches across Miami during that time. They will go back and they will say, I was persecuted for my beliefs. That's what happens.
Okay, that's so interesting because, I exist on the other coast and I have not had this experience. I mean, I used to go to church when I was a kid, and I mean,
But
obviously I was a child. Wait, let me finish.
okay,
Obviously I was a child, so wouldn't think that I would get the same reception as an adult, but I always felt, pretty good, pretty safe in that environment. And I never really felt like they were pushing anything on me very, very hard. I mean, I didn't get that experience growing up either, where like we were like, we're Christian and we're going to practice this. Actually, I feel like we were raised like pretty religiously absent.
well, here's the thing. I find that Christianity has become culture. So what I have found is you'll have a lot of people who identify as Christians and they'll say they're Christians because yeah, they go to church with their family on Sundays sometimes, and they more or less align kind of with the kind of general idea of Christianity. And I'm not going to say that these are not real Christians, but what I will say is that they are not Christians who are fully invested in the religion. The ones that I'm talking about are the ones who are fully invested in this shit. And that's who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the ones who casually go to church or who casually identify as Christians. I'm talking about the ones who live and breathe this shit.
This
That
is
is
so
who I'm talking
interesting
about.
because you know what, you're gonna laugh, but I'm pretty sure my next podcast is going to be with a Christian who is going to, you know, talk about her beliefs and how God has changed her life. So I'm hoping that
I,
these can be companion episodes and exist together in harmony.
I mean, look, man, like it's funny because one of my best friends at the time when I was younger, I was like in high school. He's still to this day, he's still in the church, and he was one of my friends I met at church, and him and one of my other best friends were all real close. And I actually spoke to him for like a good maybe 2 hours on the phone as adults, for the first time since I was maybe like 17. And he have him on Facebook, so he knows where I'm at in
Oh yeah,
life.
on your
And
socials. And where can we find you on
yes,
socials? I just want to shout you out.
yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, so you can find me at Guard Poppy, Guard Gard, Poppy.
Okay.
Um, anyway, so I talked to I said his
Yes.
name,
Okay.
but anyway, I was talking to my friend for a good 2 hours on the phone, and again, I'm not. All I did was ask questions. For example, he starts talking to me about how we're in a fallen world, and this, that, and the other, and grace, and God loves us, and yada yada yada. And so my question was, but didn't God know that? And he was like, well, yes, God has foresight, but when he placed Adam and Eve in the tree, and they ate from the tree of knowledge, they chose to sin. Yada. And then again, I asked the same question, right? But didn't God know that they would do that? And he says, well, yeah, but the devil came and he tempted them, and this, that, and the other. And again, but didn't God know that the devil would become what he would become? And he was like, yeah. So then I told him, so to me, it looks like he orchestrated all of this. Because if I have foresight and I know everything, and I deliberately create a being that I know will come in, ruin my creation, which will then cause me to inflict death on them as a penalty via hell for eternal conscious torment. So then I'm going to come into the world to sacrifice myself, to appease myself of the blood curse that I put on humanity, because the being that I created, knowing that he would do that, did exactly what I knew he would do and sabotaged my creation, but I'm the savior. Does that not seem a little convoluted to you? Like, that's quite ridiculous.
So what was the
Because
product of the conversation? Like, how did it
there what
end?
and they're pretty much on an agree to disagree.
Okay.
He really didn't have answers for me, and that's what I found interesting, because this is a guy who went to seminary school. This guy studied the Bible, and then even after all of that, you cannot give me a definitive answer, or an answer that at the very least makes sense. Because at the very end, I told him, from everything that you're telling me, God either seems indifferent or he's evil. Like I'm really having difficulty seeing him as anything other than that. You know what I mean? I remember, I think the final point of the conversation was, I asked him, if God told you to kill your son, would you do it? And he starts, well, I forgot what the pastor's name was that wrote this book that explains your religion. I said, why is your answer just not no? And that's what's really alarming to me. Why is your answer not immediately no? And he was like, well, it's not no, because God would never ask me to do that. And I said, why not? He asked Abraham to
Yeah,
do
I
it.
was just about to say in the Old Testament that he asked a lot of
Right.
people to do a lot of bad things.
Right. I said, he asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. Why would you be any different? And if the Bible says that God is the same today, tomorrow, and forever, and he's unchanging, why would he be different now?
Okay, interesting, very interesting. So I feel like, he has that attempt to clear up like a misconception. In your religion, do you guys feel like that as well, where you attempt to clear up misconceptions, or is that something that's just not a preoccupation?
The thing, it's here. Well, when I was initiated into traditional witchcraft, that's not a religion. Santeria is a religion. Um, the answer, the answer to evil in Santeria is humanity, is humanity itself. Human beings are capable of terrible things, and because of that, it puts responsibility on humans to try to make this world a lot better. We do have an idea of God, which we call Olodumare. Olodumare is everything, though. That's the thing. Olodumare is this chair. It's you. It's me. It's everything. So Olodumare is depicted often as an old man who just doesn't want to be bothered. So you can't pray to God in that context. So instead, Olodumare divides himself into different aspects, and then he has Orisha, which are emissaries of God, if you want to look at it like that are manifestations of the forces of nature, that their specific purpose is to watch after Earth and everything that's happening in this world. They are the stewards of Earth. They are taking care of Earth. God is not concerned with Earth because God is too busy creating other universes and galaxies and doing whatever the fuck it is God does. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
So the question was, are you guys concerned about clearing up like misconceptions from the public? I mean, I'm sure there's people who think that like y'all wear weird
Yeah, well, I mean,
hats
here's
and
the thing.
and stand around a cauldron.
Well, I mean, hats and cauldrons is more of like European witchcraft. I think the misconceptions that people have of Santeria is, again, the animal sacrifice, and they think it's like this dark kind of like thing. But the misconceptions that we're clearing up is not the nature of our gods or our spirits. Um, you know, there's misconceptions that come with the whole practice and what these spirits must be like. But I don't find that we're explaining ourselves as to why is there evil in the world, but yet you're saying there's a supreme loving God that controls everything, but he's not doing anything about it. That's where we're not explaining ourselves.
Okay. Um, well, I think Christians, don't they say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that humans are supposed to exercise their free will, which is why there's little to no intervention?
But that's a. I was watching this debate. I think his name's Matt Delaney. He's this guy who does this podcast I really like, or I think it's a channel, or anyway, it's called the Atheist Experience, and they were talking about free will. And the thing is that in Christianity, free will is a paradox, because if on one hand you're saying humanity has free will, but then on the other hand you're saying everything you do is a part of God's plan, how is there free will then? Because if every move I think I'm making is actually part of God's grand orchestrated plan, then there is no free will.
Well, I see that that's like a fatalist kind of viewpoint, right?
It's but it's not even a viewpoint, like that's interpreting what they're saying. The thing is they have to do mental gymnastics to somehow rationalize that we both have free will, but yet at the same time every move we make is part of God's orchestrated plan. Me on the outside is looking at that and saying, yeah, that's fatalistic, because ultimately you have no choice. By your own theology, you don't actually have a choice. Everything you do is predetermined and it's all part of God's plan.
And this is more of a view of when you were saying, people who they live by this, they're kind of like extremists. But I feel like in general,
Not even extremists. I mean people who seriously take the religion. You don't have to be an extremist to do that, but I mean the ones who are really serious about Bible believing Christians. These are the people that I'm talking to. These are the people I come across. You know what I'm saying? And this is the arguments that I have with them. Oh, we have free will, but then they're still turning around and saying, but God's greatest plan, or God has a grand plan. So which is it? That's what I'm asking. Which one is it? Because you can't both have a pre-orchestrated plan and free will. That that just doesn't make any sense.
Okay, interesting. So, how has your shift in your spirituality changed you?
Like in what way?
I mean, you could best describe it, right? Like, how's it changed? Let's say, how's it changed how you live your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was coming from a place of just a lot of, again, also traumatized by Christianity because I was one of the bitches that took that seriously. You know what I'm saying? And I had a lot of self-loathing because of it. You know, I had a lot of just that I was dealing with, and I, because that's the teachings of Christianity: deny yourself, deny your cross, and follow me. Deny your passions, deny your heart, deny what you want. You have to follow God. You have to follow God. You know, and that creates a lot of internal turmoil in a person. And I'm not the only one. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I know a lot of Christians are really deeply unhappy, but that's because I was there and we're receiving the same message of deny yourself, don't do what you want. I mean, when you're in a religion where their book, the Bible, says don't even listen to your heart because it's deceptive above all things. When you're taught to not even trust yourself, like that, you are setting someone up for really serious psychological torture. You know what I'm saying? Because you at that point can't distinguish what you like, what you think is wrong. You know what I'm saying? Because if you feel a thing, oh no, I can't trust that because that's my heart, it could be lying to me. You know what I mean? So once I came into witchcraft, and it is the exact opposite of that, it is the embracing of humanity. I think I feel witchcraft is the ultimate expression of man's curiosity to nature, and it is the full embracing of man in all of his aspects and all of his facets. You know what I'm saying? There are wild primal gods that represent all of the wild primal parts of human nature. Of primal lust, of desire, of war, a lot. All these parts that are human. They are ultimately human, though, and I think that's what makes the gods so relatable, because so many of them are flawed, just like we are. And that's, I think, makes them way more um, easy to understand and to comprehend when you're reading about the goddess of love who had her heart broken. You know what I'm saying? Even if the goddess of love could be heartbroken, it just makes her more relatable. So that when you go to the goddess of love because you are heartbroken, you're going into it knowing that this spirit knows that feeling, as opposed to going to a being who does not know what that is.
So it sounds like, through witchcraft, you've been able to accept certain facets of yourself that you were rejecting under
All
Christianity.
parts, all parts, the good, the bad, the ugly, the parts that I thought I was supposed to be better than. It is embracing yourself as a whole. You know what I'm saying? And there's the power in that. I was having a discussion with one of my initiates the other day, and I think that we are so enmeshed in Western Christian ideas of divinity that for a lot of witches coming into the craft, they have a hard time connecting with the gods, because we're, by the conditioning, taught that the gods are somewhere up here, and they're kind of out of reach, or you have to reach them somehow. But the real mystery in the art is that you are them. And if you never look inside of yourself to find them, you will never find them, because we are them and they are us. And that in itself, is being human in itself, is divine. And that's why we have the gods who are in our images, to reflect that, because it is a reciprocal thing. It kind of reminds me, I think it's a Hindu, I could be wrong, but it was a Hindu guy I knew a while back, that he told me the story that basically was something like, in their religion, and again, I could not be Hinduism, I could be wrong, but in the religion, all of humans started off as gods, and we all had powers, and we were all like these incredible beings, but we started to abuse that power. So all of the gods convened together, and they were like, we have to hide away man's power because he's going to destroy this world. So they were all like, well, we'll hide it here, we'll hide it there. And they're like, no, he'll find it there, he'll find it there. So then the supreme god eventually decides, well, we will hide it within himself because he'll never think to look there.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, so far I feel like we've had some very interesting discussion.
I would agree.
Yeah. Right. So you are an author, okay? And when did you
Yeah.
first write Summerlin? When did it first come out?
that's a funny story.
I think it was
So
2018. It was released in 2018, right?
yes, actually, that is the
Wow,
you no, well, it wasn't, no, it
wow.
wasn't, well, no, no, it was really the first. Noah came out in 2020,
Oh,
but I wrote technically. Okay, so
and
technically
I
this
thought I
was
was just
started.
such a great friend. I was like, I got the
Yeah,
dates. I got the
no, no,
dates.
no. My lore is a little complicated, but so I technically wrote the very first book when I was 22, and it was actually the third book. So the third book that I just published now was the first one that I ever wrote,
Okay, and give us the
and
name.
so that's the gospel, which I just published, the Gospel of Abel, which is the third book in the Summerland series. So when I was 22, I wrote that manuscript or that draft, but when I finished it, I shelved it because I thought to myself, this just feels like it's missing something that I don't quite see yet. And so I shelved it, and then I kept kind of fleshing out the story throughout the years. You know what I'm saying? I have a journal full of all of my ideas of like what, where I was taking the story at a time, which I love going back to look at because it's just so crazy to see how this was like notes, and then now it's actual books that people are reading. Um, so I went back and then I realized that's not the first one, that's the third one. So then I wrote backwards. So then I wrote Noah right after, when I was 24, and then in 2020 I published book one, and then it was what, 2021, I think, or 2022 I published the second book, and then just last year I published the third book.
Okay, from what we just had in this discussion, I feel like in your second book, which is the Gospel of Levi, that feels like your story because Levi goes from, believing one thing about his family and his
Yeah.
magic to going and kind of deciphering his own past and embracing a different side. Is that
Yeah,
correct or
yeah. It's funny because it's weird. I don't know if you know what flow is, but
like the
when
flow
I,
state?
yeah, like flow state.
Of course I know what flow state is. What you think this is?
Baby. So,
Please.
when I write, I completely blank out. Like I'm not even really like I look at my outline, which I create. I'll go, okay, chapter one, I have to hit on this, this, and that, and then but when I sit down and my fingers touch the keyboard, I don't even know. I just totally space out. I'm not sure what I'm really writing too much, or the dialogue that's coming out, the characters, and things like that. Um, and I just think it's interesting because, kind of to your point, once I finish the book and I'm going through it again, I realize, I think, how much of my subconscious I'm pulling on when I read it back. And part of that is Levi's journey. Because, his story is he's literally the current incarnation of Jesus Christ who winds up turning against God at some point. And the whole point of it is, everything I knew is a lie. And when I'm being told what to do, and when I'm being told what to believe, the question ultimately becomes, what do I believe? And I think that's Levi's whole story. He's kind of like, what do I think? And then eventually he kind of comes to the conclusion of, I don't like this. And then now you're faced with a choice, right? You could be cognitively dissonant, which I feel like a lot of very religious people tend to be. No matter how much information you present them with, they still continue to believe anyway. And so Levi chose to not be. And it's a very scary thing. When I talk to Christians and they say things like, oh, well, you were just never a real believer, I can't tell you how deeply offensive I find that. And I'm not surprised because I used to say that, because again, that's also what the Bible says. They were not true believers. But when you're someone like me who was crying, I mean, boogers, Viola Davis, ugly crying at my bedside, crying to this God every night, faithfully reading his word, faithfully going to church, like pleading with him to show me anything for years, to turn around and tell me that I was not a true believer is crazy. Like is crazy. You know what I'm saying? And that's, it's hard when I had that moment of, this is a lie. I'm not even being dramatic. It's my whole world fell apart. I had an anxiety attack. Like I was like freaking the fuck out, man. Like it was one of the most painful moments in my life to realize this is all a lie. None of this is true. And that's scary and painful. And a lot of people would rather hold on to a lie than face the truth. But I'm the type of person, and I think that that's what makes witches what they are. We don't really, not that we don't care what the truth is, we just want to know what it is. You know what I mean? Even if it's ugly, even if we don't like it, even
Right.
if it's not good, I just want to know what the truth is. What is true? You know, not
That
what I
is so,
want
that
to
is
be
so
true.
interesting, and that is interesting that you have this journey of you wanted to belong to this Christian religion, and now you found a better place to belong. A
Yeah.
lot of times I feel like I've always rejected a label of belonging. Like even in high
Hmm.
school, our mascot was like the Seahawks, and they're like, "You're the Cape Coral Seahawks," and I'm like, "Bitch, I'm Steven Rodis. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, like it's
Like I don't
not
know
for
what
no
you're
Seahawks. I
talking
was like,
about." Or
what you talking about?
I know, or even like sometimes, like when you have like those fantasies where you're like, I'm gonna be a star, and I'm
Right,
like, who the fuck is joining a band? Who's
right,
joining a band?
right,
Like,
right, right.
no, I don't want to be part of a group.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting that you've had that desire. I mean, we all have a desire to belong. Um, I don't know, maybe I shut that off somewhere along my life, and I was just like, well, I would rather just be myself.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that I think human nature, we all desire to belong somewhere. That's why we have friends. If you were somebody that, I mean, we wouldn't be talking right now if you really had no desire of acceptance or to talk with somebody who understands you. You know what I mean? Now, where people find comfort in groups, to me, it wasn't even a desire to fit in with people. It was a desire to fit in with what I believed, truly believed God wanted me to do. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I try to get people to understand, because on one side, I'm very hostile towards Christians, but on the other side, I feel really bad for them because I was there. And we are talking about people who literally believe that there is a supernatural war going on against the forces of good and evil. And the devil is in the world, and he's in the media, and he's in everything that you like, and he's trying to influence you, and he's trying to stray your soul to go to hell and burn forever. These are people who really believe that. And so when I look at the way that they behave, it makes sense, because if you really believe that too, you would be acting the same way. It's kind of the people, like the people who
Mm.
stormed January 6th. Yeah, they're fucking ridiculous and idiots. But at the same time, if you actually believed that the United States was under attack because the president is saying that it is, you would probably do the same thing.
Okay, wait.
And
Can we just discuss? And I'm probably going to omit the name, but remember when I'm not even going to say her name. Remember when I reported somebody to the FBI for doing that?
yes, I do. I sure do. I sure do.
Literally, and
And
tell.
she should have, and she should have, and that's the thing. They are absolutely terrorists.
Okay,
I
that
am not
was
denying that.
that was
Domestic terrorism. That's what it was.
hysterical. I was literally like contacting the FBI, and in the paragraph, I was like, I don't even know her last name, quite frankly, but
However, I have a tip. I think she
I was
might be
like,
interested
this is
in.
where she worked on this day.
On
I was
this
like, you
day,
can find her,
there.
check her
Yeah.
W-2, and they never got back to me, and I was like, what the hell? And like
Damn.
even Office of Transportation got back to me about like canceled airline tickets, and I was like, y'all couldn't get back to me about the domestic terrorism,
You know what I'm saying?
but it's fine, it's fine.
It's fine though. But yeah, so again, when you really believe a thing, your behavior is going to reflect that ultimately. And if you're taught to hate yourself, because you are, for your sin, because of your fallen nature, because you can never be right in the eyes of God, and yada, 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 yada. I remember one of my most distinct memories is when I was 16 or 17 years old, and I went to a youth retreat in downtown Miami. And the pastor was up there giving a sermon. And this is not uncommon, and it's not the only one I've heard, but this is the one that stuck out to me. And I remember mind you, you're talking to children. You're 16, 17, maybe 18 was probably the oldest kid that was there. And the pastor is going on about, God loves us, and he says, even, which he quotes the scriptures, our greatest works are like filthy rags to him, right? So even the best that we can do is disgusting to God. And then he says, we are like cockroaches in the eyes of God. But despite our filthiness and despite our iniquity, God loves us even despite the fact that we are corrupted. And when you're using the words like disgusting, iniquity, corrupt, wicked to describe yourself, that what does that instill in a person? It
That is so
instills.
crazy because like all the times that I went to church, they definitely weren't doing that. Was what kind of church was this?
Baptist, that one at the time was.
Okay, I don't even know what kind of church I went to be honest. I only went like a handful of times. I went like 12 times, but I definitely didn't hear that.
Yeah, those. I mean, those are. If you here's the thing, that's why it stuck out because that was, in my opinion, a pretty extreme example. But if you really listen to a lot of these sermons, they're not using maybe that intense language, but the message is essentially the same. The message is we are of a fallen nature, we are corrupted, and we are disgusting before the eyes of God, and only the blood of Jesus makes us right. That is the message in its core. All of them are. So my point is when you instill a message that you yourself as a human being are evil by nature, how can you love other people? That's why I believe when Jesus says to love others like you love them yourself, I believe Christians are doing that because they don't love themselves. They actually hate themselves, and it makes sense as to why they're hating other people too.
Whew, that's a lot.
I said what I said.
Okay, all right. Well, Tony has said what he said.
And that's how Mary had a little lamb.
All right. Anything else that you would like to discuss before we kind of wrap up? Oh, and I always like to wrap up with a lightning round. And no, I did not plan the questions ahead of time. So we're just going to be messy. So you can ask me a
Let's go.
question, or I'll ask you a question, then you ask me a question, and we'll go like that.
So where do you feel like you see because the whole theme of the podcast is pseudoscience, uh, which I don't even think we got it
We
to really
didn't even get
discuss.
there. We didn't even get there.
We did not even get there. I will say, in closing, maybe in some closing thoughts, just so we can at least touch on it. Uh, I don't like the phrase pseudoscience too much because it sounds like fake science, and I don't know if I would describe witchcraft as a science. It's more like an art.
Okay.
And that's why there's a craft, right? Witchcraft implies there's an art to it, there's a finesse to it. We can't tell you, and no voodoo, no olorisha, no priest, high priest, no one can tell you how this works and why it works. We can only tell you that it does. And I can say, from my personal experience, I have seen what my shit can do. And it is not a toy. And that's why witches are not interested in proselytizing and engaging believers because I know my shit is real. I have my experiences. I know that when I do a spell to get X and I get X every fucking time that I need it, I don't need to go and run off and convince somebody that what I believe is true. Like I don't. It just speaks for itself. I do it, I get the thing and I need and I get it. Like it's really that simple. Um,
I do want to point out
so
that when I was discussing pseudoscience, I really meant like astrology, tarot, those kinds of things. Are those connected to when you say like witchcraft or no?
No, and
Okay,
that's and
so
I'm glad that you brought that up because that's the point of contention that I have because I think that what is happening with witchcraft right now is it is getting very watered down and very sanitized and it's getting mixed in with a lot of new age practices and beliefs. Some of those include things like I've asked so many people, "Oh, I'm a witch," and I ask them, "Oh, well, what's your practice? What do you do?" "Oh, well, I'm into astrology and crystals." That's not witchcraft. Like that is astrology is a system of divination. You don't have to be a witch to use that. And crystals is a crystal. Like that has nothing to do with witchcraft. If you are trafficking with spirits, if you are working spells, if you are doing mediumship, if you're consulting the dead, if you're doing these kinds of things, you are falling within the realm of witchcraft. But to call things like astrology witchcraft is I think it shows a lack of understanding of what witchcraft is. Even like Santeria. To call Santeria, even like in our culture, that's brujeria, right?
yeah.
But Santeria is not brujeria. Santeria is a religion. It is only witchcraft through the eyes of a colonial context. Because to the Spanish, who were looking at the West African religion, which is what we call Santeria now, they called it brujeria because that's what it looked like to them. But it's not. It's a religion. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm always seeking to understand and then share and kind of just inform and then bridge a gap for people. So that was a huge portion of the reason why I reached out to you, because I was like, this
Oh,
is
thank you for
very
reaching
much
out to me. I appreciate that.
clouded in mystery, shrouded in mystery and misconceptions. So I feel like I learned a lot today. I hope that everybody who listens will learn a lot. And yes, okay, so
Yeah.
let's proceed to the lightning round. Let's proceed to
All
the
right,
lightning
lightning
round
round.
because
Let's
we
go.
can't forget about that. Okay, so if you were stranded on an island, what three things you can bring people or an animal, whatever. What three things are you going to bring?
Oh man, stranded on an island. Um, uh, God, I don't
Are you
know.
not prepared for this scenario?
I was not prepared for this scenario at all. I guess I would
What?
ideally have a lover,
Okay.
to help the time go by, and weed.
I'm
And
dead. The cough came in. The cough
right
came
at the
in right on
at the moment I said right
time.
on time. I would have a lover, some weed, and I don't know, alcohol.
Okay,
I
all right.
listen. If I'm stranded, I'm gonna have a good time.
Look, I'm prepared for a lot of
That's
scenarios.
really.
I only learned how to swim because I was like, I just feel like somebody's gonna throw me off a boat one day, like on James Bond or some shit. Like,
I don't do boats, so that's just. I hope I'm never in that situation.
it's very hot on a boat. I don't like them either,
It's really
but
mostly the ocean thing. I mean, to this day, I don't go past my waist in ocean water.
oh, I like the ocean. Oh
So
no, I'll swim in the ocean. I'm weird.
I will. You won't catch me. Couldn't be me.
Ooh. All right,
Couldn't
all
be me.
right.
Could not be me. Could
Okay,
not
my
be me.
turn.
Ooh, okay. What made you ask for your first tarot reading?
Oh, I think there was a lots of emotion at that time, and I think you would agree. And I was obviously
Yes.
looking for some sort of guidance, but I don't know any 19-year-old, 20-year-old who's not looking for some sort of guidance. I still to this day have a lot of fun with it. I mean, I'm not somebody who takes anything that seriously. I mean, do you know me?
Right.
So, yeah, yeah. For me, it was more of a fun thing, and also I was looking for some answers.
Mm, respect.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, at the time, I was just learning too. I think I was like still using the little booklet.
You were using a little booklet. I was like, what? But there's no shame in that. You know what? You remember that when I
No,
sent you
like
the
everybody
pic?
started somewhere.
You remember when I sent you the pictures of like my third tarot reading? My sister used the booklet, but it still seemed accurate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, because I mean, the cards themselves, I kind of look at them like frequencies, and it's kind of like whatever's going on, like the cards are going to reflect that. I don't know, there's an intelligence to the spirits behind those cards. They will show up.
I
Uh,
mean, look, everybody needs instructions. Just because you used instructions to, I don't know, assemble a table, you needed them. You needed them.
yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's like I think that especially when you're getting tarot cards read, I think it's really important to vet the reader. Um, Also, they shouldn't be asking you questions unless it's like rhetorical. If I'm asking you a question in the reading, it's because I know the answer.
Right.
I'm just trying to see if this is, what I'm saying. But you have to be careful with tarot readers because I've sat through readings where they'll sit down and go, well, the Nine of Swords means blah blah blah, and they'll just tell me what the Nine of Swords means. But it's like, what does that have to do with my life, though? Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? And that's where the intuition comes in. That's where the communicating. When I do my tarot card readings at this point, I call my ancestors, I call my spirits, and I ask them to talk to me through those cards. And then I ask the person to recite the names of their ancestors so that I can talk to them.
Okay, I
And
might
I
need an updated reading then.
yeah, that's my I've developed a little bit throughout the years, but that's how I do it now. So I mean, they're channelings essentially, and I've sat through many readings, and I'm talking about stuff that no one knows, and I think that's the sign of a
I do
reader.
remember that. Wait, I do remember that. There was a girl that we worked with who, like, you knew something about her father, and obviously you
That
had
her dad
never
died.
known her father.
That I think that was like her dad died or something like that. I remember it was the
Yes.
hostess. I
And
remember who you're talking
I
about.
know that you're not going through the obituaries looking for information.
I
Okay.
don't know anything about this girl. And mind you, so, and that's the thing too. It's like people say, "Oh, well, you could say that to anybody." Telling someone that they have a dead parent is not something that
Yeah. That's a
you.
50% chance. That's a real
That's like
risk.
that's a big risk.
Yeah.
There was an astrologer. Well, that's a whole other discussion. But I will say for another example of that, I remember I went to go see an astrologer, and this guy is a legit astrologer, not a TikTok astrologer. Like he studied under a master for 10 years. He could draft a chart by hand, like all of that. And he told me astrology is 2% the science, 98% math. All of it is math. All of it is numbers, the degrees, and like all these, because all of these things mean something. And so when I was in his class, he goes, "Who wants to show their natal chart, to the class, so I could look at it, just so we could start learning from it." And so the kid puts his hand up, and I shit you not, the astrologer glances at the chart for maybe like 3 seconds, and then he turns to the kid and he was just like, "I'm seeing that there was a lot of parental abuse, particularly coming from the father, and I feel like it's sexually explicit in nature." And he was like, "But I don't want to get into
Ew.
that too much because we're in front of people." And then the kid was like, he's like, "No, but yeah, you're right." And he's like, "Okay, you can talk to me afterwards and we can look more at your chart." And he's like, "But that's just what I got from glancing at it." I'm like, "That's what you get from glancing at something?" And mind you, those are things, again, you cannot just say that to somebody. You're like,
No.
you better be damn sure of what you're gonna say before you say something like that to somebody.
No,
And that's what I
that's true.
mean. That's what I mean. When you're sitting with readers, what don't forget vague things. They need to tell you specifics. They need to tell you specific things.
Okay, so
You know.
let's keep going with the lightning round. Okay, so you've lived in Florida, you lived in Georgia. Where do you see yourself next?
Uh, it's crazy because I feel like it kind of goes back to my books because the whole series is set across the Deep South. And after I finish the first four Gospels, I'm going to keep writing in universe books about other things. But again, all set across the Deep South. And I mean, we're from Florida. I mean, I'm from Miami, which is the furthest point south. But Miami's not really the South. But there's something about the South that I don't know. I just feel really at home here. Like
Okay,
the,
interesting.
the way people talk, their accents, like just the way they express themselves. Like there's something about it that I don't know. It's just like it's like core. I don't know. It's like something like inside me just really resonates with it. Yeah, I think one of my favorite reviews that I had gotten on it was the first book, and the review said something like, "These people remind me of the people that I grew up with." He's like, "They sound like the people that I grew up listening to talk." And I really loved that because I'm not raised in Georgia or the South like that, you know what I'm saying? But I think spending enough time here and really listening to people and appreciating it, I was able to accurately reflect that, to the point where locals and natives could feel like this is us, like this is us talking. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so to answer your question, I don't know where, but I think anywhere in the South probably I'll end up. I don't really like the North too much.
Okay, I love the North. I'm plotting a move to the North as we speak, so
It's too cold.
it's too cold. Yeah, but the cold when you can bring out the fashion.
The cold is painful. I tell people all the time, like I'd rather be really hot over really cold.
I kind of like being cold, especially because, like, okay, so if it's cold outside, you can go to the gym, you can run some errands, you can do XYZ
Yeah, you
thing.
could go to the gym and take a freezing ass walk to your car to get there, and then a freezing ass car back when you leave. Like, no, it's
Oh,
not for
okay,
me.
all right, all right, all right. And I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, "Oh no, you're gonna hate it because the sun's barely out." And I was like, "That's heaven. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" And
I
they were
can't
like, "So
afford
you
that.
didn't notice this winter when the sun was out for 10 days, or wasn't out for 10 days straight?" And I was like, "No, I'm not keeping tabs on her when she's in the sky and when she's not. Like, what is that?
No,
What? Maybe
I
I'm
couldn't do.
crazy."
Honestly, well, no, honestly, look, I'm going to tell you right now, living in Atlanta, because here I see the actual change of seasons. We get all the seasons, and seasonal depression is a very real thing.
No, I do
Like
believe that. Yeah,
it
just not for
actually,
me.
because
I mean, I'm
I would
not.
hear. Well, I mean, I don't know how much time you've spent living up north, but for me, when it's like 3 months of winter and everything is cold and wet and dead and the sky is gray like that for months, it starts to really fuck with you. Like it's not. I me personally, it's really depressing.
Well,
It's
we will
not a fun
see.
time of
We
year.
we will find out.
Yeah, not a good time. 0 stars, but
Not 0 stars. Whew. Okay, I don't know where we were at, but
I don't know. We were doing lightning round.
we were doing lightning round. Okay, well, I think this is a good place to wrap up. And well, thank you for talking with me today.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think we gleaned a lot of amazing things.
We did. I
And
know I came off a little intense, but I'm sorry. And
you
mind you,
were
I was still
so
trying.
intense. And you know what? As I get older, I am more mellow.
I know. Isn't that weird? Like I'm actually becoming more intense.
I
Like
know. I was like, oh my God, this is so much energy right now. I'm over here like a grandma, like an old
yeah,
grandma.
you're like now, baby. Like
Yeah.
maybe.
I was this close to being like, child, stop. You're going to make people mad.
David.
Yeah. But you know what?
Oh man.
I think that's what makes me able to tackle whatever topic because, I'm not coming from a specific place. I'm not coming, to
Yeah,
twist
you're a
anything.
neutral party. Yeah,
I
that's
am.
that's 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 always good.
I'm
That's always good.
Switzerland, honey.
I can remain pretty neutral on things, but I also have very strong opinions on a lot of things. And I mean, I think just even the way, like I was talking about Christianity, if you read my books, that shouldn't be a total surprise how I feel the way I feel.
No,
Um,
yes. Okay, everybody who's listening should go out absolutely and buy a copy of Summerland. Okay, you can start. Can they start wherever or
you actually can. They are interconnected standalones, so you actually could read three and then one, and
I know because I
but
read two and I just felt like I could read this alone.
by itself, yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, that's how. But they're all part of like one greater plot. That's kind of how I read them. So the fourth book is kind of is going to conclude the overarching plot of everything, and you'll kind of see all the characters come back from the first three. Um, you know, I wasn't sure if I wanted to even cross them over at first, but I don't know. I've always been really interested in kind of playing with the universe like that, and I don't know, introducing characters from another book, and I don't know, people tend to get excited about that.
No, yeah, of course. We love a resurgence. We love a throwback. We love a recall. Wait, not a recall. I think I'm using that wrong. We don't like a recall.
No, we don't like a recall.
No, yeah, using that wrong. All right, well, have an amazing day, and I will talk to you very soon. And I cannot wait for people's response.
Absolutely. Alrighty, Stephen. Thank you for having me
All
on.
right, bye. It was good. It was
That's
all
good. I
good.
felt like that was a good episode.